Welcome to a milk market tidbit for the April federal milk marketing data that USDA released this week. This is Dr. Lawrence Jones, and I'm recording this Wednesday morning, May 15th. Now, this is our first set of data after bird flu had been diagnosed, and so it's going to be kind of interesting to see what this data is telling us. But the big overview is the statistical uniform price was down about 36 cents across the country. There was significant depooling of class 4, which can make a little bit of an interpretation hard. The pooled class 1 was actually up while class 4 was down. Month over month, it looks like production is about flat and percent fat is down just a little bit, and that's seasonal. So here are our statistical uniform prices. As I said, they were down 36 cents to 18.24. Still have this clear dividing line between the 20s and the teens. Part of this is the way that class 1 is got a different mover on it. You know, there's $5 down here in Florida. There's $3.28, $3.25 in New York, whereas in order 3033, it's $2. So that's part of that difference, which is why I always go back to looking at how they change, because that tells us basically who improved this month and who didn't. Significant depooling is going to impact that, and why wouldn't you depool class 4? Because it's $4.50 bigger than class 3. Class 3 was down 84 cents, and that's the biggest downward pressure. Our biggest negative change is going to be up here in Minnesota, Wisconsin, because they're very high class 3, and our positive changes all occurred down here in the southeast that are very high class 1. So what's going to happen to depooling? There's a good chance in June we will not be depooling anything. So that's going to be interesting to see how the data kind of flops around. And then starting probably in July, again, they'll start depooling. Anytime there's 75 cents difference between class 3 and class 4, you tend to depool the higher one. So let's look at what happened. So overall, the Southeast actually decreased their class 3 utilization by about 2 percentage points. But the strange one was actually Arizona. They decreased that by 12.5%. Now, if you mirror this over into what happened in daily production, it's very similar. For example, Arizona's down 4.5%. Well, that's probably depooling, where a lot of the midsection is down, 1 to 1.5%, and that's also probably depooling. Now, given that Texas, New Mexico is up 4% and Florida is up 4%, I think there was significant movement of milk, because again, remember, these are plant level data. So there was probably milk going from Ohio, Indiana, Western New York down to Texas and or Florida. Even with all that depooling, daily production month over month was up, just a little bit. I mean, less than a fraction of a percent, which really surprised me. If we only look at 1, 2, and 3 and ignore 4, we're up over 1%. And so, in fact, I think production is pretty flat here. And in fact, if we look at what USDA generally says, is we're pretty flat March to April. And if we look at all of these different graphs, we know that class 3, is coming up a little bit. Class 4 as well as class 2 are probably down just a little bit. So my guess is that April production will be flat month over month. That puts us at about 18.9 billion pounds, and that will be a decrease year over year of 1.2, and that's exactly where we were last month. And if we look at daily production, this would be my seasonal adjusted level, because normally we come up just a little bit in April, but again, we're pretty flat. So if we look at class 4, we're only pooling 21%, and so this would be our capacity. We're way off of that, but that's because of a depooling issue, not a big deal. But if we look at class 3, we're pushing this pretty hard. from where our maximum has been. In fact, we're about 94% of that capacity. We're only off about 6.7 million pounds of milk a day uh, from filling that cheese capacity to its limits. Class 1 utilization was about 27%, very high in the southeast. Class 3 is about 57, and again, this is going to be influenced by deep pooling. Minnesota, Wisconsin was 92%, so they're very reliant on Class 3. Texas is 64%. Again, they're going to deep pool Class 4, but California at 72, they're going to deep pool Class 4. And if we look at, Texas only got 0.5%, California 2.7% of Class 4, only 6.83% overall. Areas like the Northeast that generally does not depool is, 16, and the Northwest is, 23, almost 24%. Fat values were down about 300s. We're still about 4% here in the Southeast. Florida came down a little bit to 391. The heat's starting to pile up there. But even Texas, where it's been hot, it's 419. The highest is always out here in the Northwest at 435. We only get protein for a few of the samples. The lowest is always New York at 3.2. The highest is always the Northwest at 3.4. All right, so here's our calendar, and so we're not going to know if my prediction will verify until the 20th when we get the milk production report. I think that's going to be kind of a big report. Not much else coming out. This week we do have the second National Dairy Sales Report for May, and then just the usual dairy slaughter and upper Midwest spot milk prices. All right, I'll get you another report when we get the milk production report on next Monday.